Christ is in our midst. Welcome to Spiritual Calisthenics.
On Sunday, July 9th, we commemorate the fifth Sunday of Matthew, the Holy Hieromartyr Pancratius, Bishop of Tauromenium in Sicily, St. Dionysios the Orator, and St. Metrophanes of Mount Athos. Regarding St. Pancratius, Bishop of Sicily, this saint, who was a contemporary of the Apostles, had Antioch as his homeland, where he was guided to the faith by Peter, the chief of the Apostles. Later, he came to Sicily, where he brought many to the faith and was finally put to death by the pagans. As a share of the ways and a successor to the throne of the Apostles, O inspired of God, you found discipline to be a means of ascent to divine vision. Wherefore, having rightly divided the word of truth, you did also contest for the faith, even unto blood, O Hieromartyr Pancratius. Intercede with Christ our God, that our souls be saved. He that breathed with tongues of fire upon the holy apostles gave you, O Pancratius, the selfsame mystical graces, as the heir and true disciple of Simon Peter. You did shine upon the west with the saving gospel, and with blood did seal your preaching both as a hierarch and faithful martyr of Christ. The readings are according to the week. From St. Paul's letter to the Romans. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they may be saved. I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but it is not enlightened. In other words, even though St. Paul is a Jew by birth, from the tribe of Benjamin, and educated by Gamaliel, he has now transported himself into Christendom, and he does not hate the Jews. Even though he's the apostle to the Gentiles, he is saying that he wishes that they would be saved, that they too could be enlightened. For being ignorant of the righteousness that comes from God and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. For Christ is the end of the law, that everyone who has faith may be justified. So in other words, when we look at the scriptures, when we look at the prophecies, the Psalms, all of these things point to Christ. He is that end. Moses writes that the man who practices righteousness, which is based on the law, shall live by it. But the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven, that is to bring Christ down. So in other words, don't take on the role of God, saying, well, he's going to heaven and he's going to hell. Or who will descend into the abyss, that is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, on your lips and in your heart. That is, the word of faith which we preach. Because if you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For man believes with his heart and so is justified. He confesses with his lips and so is saved. Now, this salvation that is coming is very appropriate as we go into the gospel passage. At that time, this is according to the gospel according to St. Matthew, when Jesus came to the country of the Gergesenes, 2 demoniacs met him, coming out of the tombs, so fierce that no one could pass that way. Now, where do they live? They live in tombs. They live in the place of the dead, because that is the natural place of the demons, of the evil one. Not in community, not with the living, but with the dead, out in the desert. And behold, they cried out, what have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time? Now, this is important, because this passage of Matthew is also tied together to 2 other passages of demoniacs. One is the demoniac legion, which is going to be the exact same ending as this, but also to the man who had a son who was demon-possessed, where the boy was being perpetually thrown into the fire and into the water to destroy him. These are, of course, things that we discuss much more in depth on the 4th Sunday of Great Lent, the Sunday of St. John Climacus, in which we will discuss the spiritual ramifications of this. But what we're seeing here is the demons have taken complete control of these individuals, and they think that they are going to offend Christ by saying, what do you have to do with us, O Son of God? Now we have to understand something here, because this is very, very important. They are calling him Son of God, but they do not believe that he's actually the Son of God, the Logos. We know this because when the devil attempted to tempt Christ after his 40 days in the desert after his baptism, this betrays an ignorance of the fact that Jesus Christ is God. Because after all, if Jesus is God, he doesn't need necessarily to eat. So why bother tempting him with bread? He already owns all of the world. He created the world. So why would he need the devil to give him the world and have the world worship him if he already has that worship by being God himself? So this is the adoptive term, Son of God. This was how a lot of people viewed the Christ would be, just a man who is through adoption made into the Son of God, and not actually the Son of God, not actually the Logos. And so they are trying to do one of two things. They're either trying to rankle Christ in two ways, either saying, hey, wait, it's not the end of the world yet, so don't destroy us, and two, trying to get people to rise up and get Christ to say, hey, he's the king, he's the Son of God, he's the King. Let him free us from the Romans. Now, Jesus Christ obviously is not happy with this, and the demons know that they're in trouble. And so it continues. Now a herd of many swine was feeding at some distance from them. And the demons begged him, if you cast us out, send us away into the herd of swine. And he said to them, go. So they came out and went into the swine, and behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and perished in the waters. Now, this teaches us something. It teaches us two things. One, these swine were being raised by Jews, which is not right because it was considered unclean, it was defiling, and so they are living kind of their own life. They're not being obedient to the will of God. But second, this shows us what the demons intend for us. The intention of the demons is our destruction. Again, where were they living? They were living in the tombs. The demons' ultimate desire for us is suicide. They want us to kill ourselves, so that in our sin we will separate ourselves from God completely and be devoid of all salvation. So the demons seek to kill us. They seek to destroy us. And so we see demons not as these all-powerful creatures that are seeking to destroy us, but rather like dogs on leashes. Because what we're seeing here is that if they were not bound back, then they would do to us like they do to the swine. There would be no hesitation, there would be no reasoning, there would be no all this doubt and arguing and crying in our minds. It would just be, okay, I'm just going to rush headlong into the drink and kill myself. This shows us that even at the base level, Christ is protecting us from the assaults of demons and of their power. And this shows us their intention, that their intention is not to make us feel better. Their intention is not to bring us to hedonistic joy. Their intention is to separate us from God and kill us so that we will be destroyed, so that we will be separated from God. Because we have to understand, our souls have no value to the devil. It's not like some, these fairy tale things where it's like, oh, your soul is worth like thousands of gold coins in paradise. No. Value is seen only in the person that assesses value. The devil doesn't have any value to us. We are valuable to God. We are valuable to Christ. And as such, he wants to be with us. He loves us. Well, the devil cannot hurt Christ. And so what is the devil going to do? The only way he can hurt Christ is hurt those that he can actually harm, us. By preventing us from going to paradise, by preventing us from being with Christ, the devil can actually hurt God by separating us from him because he is our righteous God. The herdsmen fled, and going into the city, they told everything and what had happened to the demoniacs. And behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to leave their neighborhood. And getting into a boat, he crossed over and came to his own city. Now, what does this show us? That sometimes even when we see help, the cross of Christ is help, it is salvific. But instead of accepting that, instead of accepting help and moving towards salvation, what do? We reject it. We say, no, get away, get away. Even though we see the demoniacs healed, in their right mind, clothed, instead of embracing that salvation and saying, they've been saved. What can we do to be saved? This is clearly God in our presence. No, get away from us. And not in the way that Peter says, get away from me for I'm a sinful person. But basically saying, we reject the salvation that you offer. Let us not fall to this same deceit by the evil one.
I hope that you've enjoyed today's spiritual calisthenics. Have a blessed and wonderful day.